Hello, my name is John Collins, and I am the VP of Engineering at UBiqube. And today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to MSActivator 2.0, which is the new version of our flagship product, MSActivator. Now, when we designed this new version of the product, we had a number of design goals in mind. Firstly, we wanted to make it easy for you to integrate all of your infrastructure into one place, a single pane of glass. Secondly, we wanted to make it easier for you to develop new automation solutions to manage all of that infrastructure. So let's see how we achieve these goals. So before we start a live demo of the product itself, I just have one slide that I want to share with you, which is going to explain the different layers of our integrated automation framework. Firstly, to begin with, we have our adapter library. The purpose of the adapters in our product is to simply get a connection between MSActivator and the infrastructure that we're managing. We can do this using whichever protocol the vendor that we're connecting to supports. So we have one simple goal here, it's to get a connection. Secondly, once we have that connection, we can then start to apply our microservices. Our microservices are a way to issue commands to the entity that we are managing using the connection that we've already established via the adapter. And typically, these commands fall under what we call CRUD-I, which is create, read, update, delete. And we also have additionally import, which enables us to not only create and update configurations on the entities that we're managing, but we can also import the configurations from those entities, which enables us to do a two-way synchronization. Those first two parts of the framework form what we call our integration layer. Thirdly, moving forwards, we have our workflow layer. Our workflow is a library of reusable chunks of code. And those code chunks can be written in either PHP or Python. It's up to you to choose. And the idea is to enable you to program business logic into your solutions. So this is typically if then else logic. So for example, if this happens, then call that microservice, else call something else. So it's a simple way for you to develop automated solutions using easy to use scripting languages from the community. And then finally, we have our BPM layer, which is a business process management layer. So what the BPM enables you to do is it enables you to visually stitch together all of the solutions from the lower layers. So for example, you can drag and drop workflow code blocks into your processes, connect various code blocks together, and then execute them all as a single process. So ease of use with the BPM is extremely high because at this stage, you don't even need to touch any code. So we have a very, very high degree of abstraction achieved. Now let's have a look at the solution itself live. So the first thing that you will see is this login screen. And as you can see, there are two options to choose from. You can log in as a developer. And the intent of the developer dashboard is to provide a single integrated environment that enables DevOps engineers to develop new integration and automation solutions. So we provide code editors, we provide microservice editors, and we provide the BPM editor to enable the developer to develop and test full end-to-end solutions. And then once they're happy with those solutions, they can then publish them to be consumed by the managers. On the management dashboard, here we're more concerned about the day-to-day management of our infrastructure. So we have a dashboard that will give the status of all of our infrastructure and also enable you to execute the automation solutions that have been developed by the developers. So let's begin with the developer dashboard first. So the first thing that you will see after you log in is you will see we have these three swim lanes. We have the BPM library, we have the workflow library, and we have the microservices library. So they obviously align with the three highest layers of the framework that I described to you earlier. We do internally also, of course, have our adapter library, but developing adapters right now, it's an offline activity simply because it's not something you have to do very often. However, you would be doing microservice, workflow, and BPM development pretty much every other day. Now, the nice thing from a developer perspective about this dashboard is you're only one click away from all the editors that you need. So, for example, if I click on Create, I have options to open the BPM editor. I can open the workflow editor. And finally, I can open the microservices editor. So the intent is to have a single solution that's fully integrated, that is very easy to use, and it enables developers to be productive from the get-go. Now, in terms of the actual development itself, briefly, I will show you what that looks like. So let's begin by talking about the microservices. So microservices are a way to issue commands to an entity that we have a connection to, as we already mentioned earlier. And if I choose an example here, I can click on the editor icon over here. And what you will see is there's two main parts to a microservice from a design perspective. The first part is the variables. These are the parameters that we're going to collect from the user when the microservice is executed. And obviously, you can create as many here as you wish, and you can edit existing variables, and there are many different parameters supported and different types and so forth. You can see on the drop down here. Once you define your microservice variables here, when the microservice is executed, it will render a screen to collect that information from the user. Or, of course, we can call the microservice via an API call, a REST API call, and pass in that data as well. Now, very briefly, you can see here also there's a second part to the microservice, which is the commands themselves. And here we can see an editor where you can define the commands that are going to be executed on the entity when this particular create call is called, for example. And you can see here where the parameters are used, where we can pass down the parameters to that call. So as we mentioned before, it follows the framework of create, read, update, delete, and import. And of course, depending on the commands that is provided by the vendor itself or the device that we're integrating, whether that be a Docker, whether that be a Linux VM, an EC2 instance, it can be anything essentially. It's up to the developer to decide which commands are passed down to that entity over the connection when each of these commands is executed in the microservice layer. So once we have a microservice defined, we can then call that microservice directly, or more interestingly, we can call the microservice from a workflow. So let's take a look at the workflow development next. So let's take the example of a very simple workflow, which I think anybody can understand. In this workflow, we're simply going to ping an IP address that is provided when the workflow is executed. So if I open up the editor, what we can see is we can see that just like with the microservices, the workflows are also broken down into two parts. We have the variables and we have the code that's executed when the workflow is called. In this instance, as it's such a simple workflow, we simply have one parameter, which is the IP address that we are going to ping. Secondly, we have the code that's going to be executed when the workflow is executed. So we have some code here that is going to be called, which is basically going to ping the IP address that the user types in. We also provide in the solution an SDK. The SDK enables developers to reuse common code, and we provide a lot of common code in the library that's available to use out of the box. So we can see here, for example, that from that SDK, we are calling the ping method, which is simply going to ping the IP address that is provided by the user. Now, what does that look like then when we execute? If I run the ping workflow now, you can see that it will render a screen and will ask for an IP address. So obviously the user can type in their IP address here and then simply execute the workflow. And of course, the workflow will call the code that we showed a moment ago and execute that code using this parameter that I have provided. And as you can see, the status on the workflow is green. So that indicates that the code has executed successfully. Okay, so that is the simplest example of a workflow. Obviously, realistically, workflows would be more complex than that, depending upon the use case that you want to execute. Now, within our automation solution, apart from workflows, we also provide support for BPMs. A BPM is a way to visually drag and drop in code blocks that you want to execute without necessarily having to get into the detail of the code underneath. And here's a very simple example where we've got two processes. One is going to create a managed entity. And you can see when I click on that box, we get a panel on the right-hand side here, which shows all of the parameters that workflow is going to accept. And I've also pre-populated this with some values. And if I choose my second process, which is the ping one that I showed a moment ago, you can see we get a different list. In this instance, ping only requires one parameter, which is the IP address. Okay, so suppose as a developer, I've developed my microservices, my workflows, my BPM, and I'm happy with my solutions. I've saved and published everything. Let me now execute the developer platform and show you the management interface. So here I'm logged into the manager dashboard. As you can see, it's very different from the developer dashboard that we looked at a moment ago. The first thing that you will notice is you can see that we have all of these circles, which are basically showing the status of your infrastructure. The green obviously represents infrastructure that's healthy. The red represents infrastructure that's unreachable. And then we have an interim step, which is the amber, which is infrastructure that we have connected to in the past, but for some reason, we're having issues right now. So obviously, as an infrastructure manager, you want to see a lot of green, and you want to look at this screen and just see green circles everywhere. If you see red or amber, that's obviously a call to action. You will also notice that the circles themselves are actually made up of 3 concentric circles. So here, for example, we can see the outer circle with a small piece of red, and the rest of it is green. That indicates that some of these entities are red, obviously in a bad state, and the rest of them are in a healthy state. And the outer circle of the tree represents physical entities. The middle circle of the tree represents public cloud, and the inner circle represents private cloud. And then obviously the count numbers in the center of the circle is showing how many entities are connected to this particular subtenant. So you can imagine this dashboard on a large screen in a network operations center, for example. What you want to see is you want to see a wall of green. And that's the main thing that you're going to be watching out for as a manager day to day. We also have this other circle here on the right-hand side, and it is showing the status of the workflows that have been executed recently. Obviously, again, the green is showing success and the red is showing failure. You will notice as well that there's a count in the center. In this instance, that's the overall count of the amount of workflow instances that have been executed. And then below here, you can see that we have a feed of all the recent executions. And you can see the green tick represents a success, you can see who ran that, and you can see when they ran that. If you see a red X, that obviously indicates that that particular workflow instance has failed. So you can go in and investigate and see why. So as you can see on this dashboard, you have a lot of information at your fingertips. And this is all live information driven by the MSActivator REST API. So when something happens on the back end, this interface is updated immediately. The other thing of note you will see is up in the corner here, we also see counts of the amount of unreachable, critical, and connected managed entities we have in this instance. And you will see everywhere I navigate in the system, those counts remain in the same place. They are persistent. So no matter where you are in the user interface, you will always see high-level counts of your infrastructure. As this is a subtenant system and with support for tenants, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select a tenant that I've configured earlier. And in this particular tenant, presently I only have one managed entity, and it just so happens to be in a red state. That's not important. It's just a test device. You'll also see up here that the numbers have changed to reflect the fact that I've selected tenant, which only has one managed entity currently configured. If I go back to my dashboard, you will see just one entity and one circle. So you can imagine, for example, if I was a manager of this particular entity, this particular subtenant, I would only see this entity. I wouldn't see everybody else's entities. Here I'm logged in as a super user, so I can choose anybody. But if I was logged in as a manager at this level, I would simply see the entities for this particular subtenant. So going back then to the BPM and the workflow we developed earlier, let's suppose we want to execute that now. If I go to my automation list, I can see the same BPM that was in the developer view. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and execute this. I have this IP address here, which is basically for a managed entity that's inside our network. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this, and it's going to create that managed entity inside this tenant, and you should see the feedback happening live. So let me go ahead and execute. So first, you can see that my two tasks in my BPM have executed successfully. So let's go and check the results. So the first thing we can do, if we click on the integration option, I now see I have this new managed entity. And currently it's in a green state. So that reflects the fact that it hasn't actually been reached yet. And the system is still trying to provision and set up that in the background as we speak. So that's why it's in that gray state. If I click through, I can see details about the device itself. So I can see the vendor, I can see the model, etc. And I can attach microservices to manage this entity if I wish. There's also, of course, a managed entity editor. So I can go in here and change properties about the entity itself, such as, for example, the credentials for actually logging in and managing that device. If I go back to my dashboard, you can see on my dashboard, I now have two entities. Previously, I had one. And you will also note that it's now showing green on the dashboard. Now, pay attention to the numbers up here. You can also see that in real time, as we were speaking, that also went from the gray column to the green column to indicate that that managed entity is now connected. So we have two entities here. One is connected and one is not connected. And again, as you can see, as I was executing those workflows, we can see here the results is captured on this feed out. And if I go back to my integration, you can now see that that managed entity has gone green. So this is a very, very simple example of what we can do with the MSActivator 2.0 product. Hopefully you got a feel for how easy it is to develop and execute automation solutions. And of course, this is a simple example you can go very, very far beyond this and integrate your own infrastructure and develop your own automation solutions dependent upon your particular use cases. Our framework and our product is very flexible and it can support all of your needs. Thank you for your time.